I'm gonna show you how to squat for maximal growth. So what is growth? Growth is building muscle, building strength, and all of that good stuff. Before we put a barbell on her back and talk about different barbell positions, we're gonna talk about setting up in her ideal squat stance. Everybody is different depending on their shape and size and proportions, but one recommendation that I can give that will suit everybody is to start with your feet just outside of shoulder width, toes pointed very slightly outwards. From here, you're gonna see she's not just standing passively. What we like to do is externally rotate the hip joint, so this bone here externally rotates, and you're going to see her screwing her feet into the ground. The next thing you're going to see is her knees pointing very slightly outwards, and that will make her feet feel like they're really gripping onto that ground. And now when she lowers her body into that bottom position, her hips open, her knees point out in the same direction as her toes, and allow for room for her pelvis to achieve that bottom position and remain neutral. Now let's have a look at this with the barbell on the back. Starting with the hand position. You grab the barbell as close as your shoulder mobility allows. Dinny is very mobile, so her grip is very close. Now coming under the barbell, what we want to do is place that barbell on the shelf created by her rear delts. From here, she pulls her elbows back, which allows her to use her middle back muscles to hold upper back tightness. Elbows back creates this shelf for the barbell to sit on. Now she's going to think about back and down. That down component allows her to activate her strong lats, which act as a stabilizer of the core. They attach at the front of the shoulder and come all the way down to the top of the hip. So of all of our core muscles, the lats actually cover the longest distance of our spine. So when they're active, they do a great role in keeping this torso nice and rigid so we can load it as heavy as possible. From this position, looking straight ahead with her feet underneath her hips, she takes a big breath and takes 3 steps out. The first step is straight back, the other's in her ideal squat stance. Looking straight ahead because the body follows the eyes, screwing her feet into the ground. She takes a big breath to brace, and she opens her hips, spreading the floor, knees out in the same direction as her toes. She controls that weight down to the bottom position and gradually accelerates in and out of the hole. The speed of the up phase is standing with intent, which is explosive but still under control. Something that you're going to notice here is a forward torso lean just to balance the barbell over a midfoot. It also means that there's going to be more of a hip angle, making it a much more hip dominant movement, which is handy when we want to shift the heaviest loads. That muscles around the hip are a lot larger than the muscles around the knee. Something that's very important regardless of the type of squat position is that we line up collar of the bar in line with the midfoot. When we do a low bar squat, the position of the barbell on the back forces the torso to lean very slightly forward to allow for this collar to line up with the center of our base of support, or in other words, with our midfoot. So this is why you're going to see more forward torso lean in a low bar squat. What you're also going to see is a lot more happening at the hip joint and less happening at the knee joint. If you look at the space between the hamstrings and the calf, they're not going to be touching compared to the high bar squat, where the objective is to press the hamstring against the calf to ensure that we're maximizing our knee joint flexion. Now let's have a look at the high bar squat. In my opinion, this is the #1 squat pattern to build quadriceps. Walking up to the barbell, grabbing it as close as her shoulder mobility allows. Coming under the barbell, placing the barbell on the upper trapezius, pulling the elbows back and shoulder blades down to activate all of the right muscles of the upper back and creating a nice shelf of upper trapezius muscle for that barbell to rest on. Taking a big breath to brace, she's going to take the same 3 steps, standing in her comfortable stance, initiating the movement by screwing her feet into the floor, taking a big breath to brace, looking straight ahead. She squats as deep as her mobility allows. With this squat pattern, you're going to see a much more upright torso angle and you're going to see a lot more knee bend. Let's have a look at how different footwear can modify the way that we use our different muscles in our squats. Starting off with an elevated heel weightlifting shoe. This is the shoe that we love to use when we're doing a high bar squat. But if you lack the mobility for any of your squat patterns, it's fine to use them for all squat variations. Have a look at how when Dinny comes down into the full squat pattern, there's a little bit of forward torso lean, but not as much as in a low bar squat. But it's also not as upright as when we really elevate those heels. The hamstrings press up against the calf, so it's great for quadriceps development. Now let's exaggerate that exact position. For the squat pattern, to hit your quadriceps better, you want the torso to be more upright and you want the pelvis and spine to be as neutral as possible. And some people don't have the mobility to achieve that position. So my favorite tool to help achieve this is elevating the heels. The rule that we have with stance width is the wider the stance, the more adductors and hip muscles we're using. So if the goal is to focus on quads, we don't want to do that. So therefore, targeting the quads, bring the feet in a little bit more. So with a slightly closer stance and the heels elevated 1 inch from the shoes and about 2 inches from the platform, that's a very high heel elevation. Have a look at how deep she can get while still maintaining a very upright torso angle and a neutral spine position, and look how much her hamstring covers the entire surface of her calf, making it a very good quadriceps build-up. The bigger the heel, the less stable the movement, meaning a little bit less weight, but it's going to mean a lot more quadriceps focused exercise. Same rules, hands as close as mobility allows, elbows back, shoulder blades down. This time we're standing very slightly closer to emphasize quadriceps, looking straight ahead, taking a big breath to brace, squatting as deep as her mobility allows, which is a lot deeper and much more upright torso angle, much more knee bend, much more percentage of the calf is being covered by that hamstring. Now let's have a look at no shoes at all, or that's going to be equivalent to a flat-soled shoe, which is my preference for a hip-dominant low-bar squat. So the rule is when I want to use more hips, I stand very slightly wider. So a low-bar squat with flat-soled shoes or no shoes at all, we want the widest of all of those squat variations. So slightly wider stance, you're going to see more forward torso lean, less knee bend, so less surface of this calf is being covered by that hamstring. And most of the work happens at this big, strong hip joint, which is handy when we're trying to shift the heaviest loads possible. The best way that I like to teach the squat is to control the movement into the bottom position, gradually accelerate in and out of the hole, and then stand with intent. Now, this is important for squatting heavy weights, and it's also important for building muscle. Control wins every time. You may see some of your favorite Olympic weightlifters where they squat very fast and they bounce in and out of the hole. That's a totally different technique that's very important for their high speed movements. So when it comes to squatting the heaviest loads or building the most amount of muscle, using a controlled tempo is going to be the best way to squat. And that is controlled on the way down and standing with intent. So now let's talk about when you're going to use each of these squat variations and who would need them most. It makes sense to use the squat pattern that's going to allow you to shift the heaviest weights. The low bar squat is the one to do that. However, if all you do is perform the low bar squats, you are going to end up with underdeveloped muscles, mainly quadriceps. So therefore, the best approach is actually to utilize both. On the flip side, if you just want to maximize quadriceps growth, there still is a place for low bar squats. And that is teaching your body how to handle heavier loads, so that when you come back to the high bar squats, you're using heavier weights and can maximize quadriceps growth through heavier weights. So if you want to know which squat pattern you should be using, well, the answer is both. Because one of the most important training principles to ensure your long-term progression is training variation. And actually, both of these movements are going to complement each other so much. If you found this advice useful, click the link here, and that's going to take you to my ultimate deadlift tutorial, which is going to be the only deadlift tutorial that you'll ever need. And if you want to keep getting stronger and keep looking better, click subscribe for more.